If you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, please sell one and buy a sword. Because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on the streets. This revolution is not about burning cars. This revolution is not in angry faces. This revolution is in the mind. It's about building cars and selling them to make our own money. Peace and love, freedom and decolonization to all African people from wherever you find yourself. This is Kabbalah from the African Continental Unity Party, ACUP, which is an emerging Pan-African movement that transforms itself into political parties in every African countries where we go. And our vision is to rebuild Africa as a global power base. Thank you very much for joining us again today on our weekly schedule where we talk about issues related to our liberation and our emancipation as African people. And today we are going to discuss a very important topic, a topic that we don't often talk about, which is the process or the steps that we have to undertake in order to achieve our freedom or the total liberation. And mostly when we talk about the liberation of Africa, we forget the central piece, which is the African people, because we cannot talk about Africa without African population. And therefore, anything that we want to talk about Africa, whether we talk about development, whether we talk about prosperity, whether we talk about liberation, it is essentially applied to the African people. Now, the question that we have today is it possible for one person or for a people to come straight out of centuries of enslavement, centuries of colonialism, right? Let's say centuries of enslavement, because colonialism and slavery is one thing. So can people come out of these projects of enslavement, of slavery for centuries and automatically achieve freedom or become totally free in a way that allows them to be able to manage the states or to manage their nation? That's the question that we ask. And the history has showed us that it is not possible. Every time you get people out of freedom, out of slavery, those people are supposed to go through some steps that will allow them to acquire totally the freedom, that will allow them to take charge of their lives. Because when we talk about the freedom, in the case of our fellow Africans who were taken abroad to be made slaves, or in the case of Africans who were on the continent, it means when you are freed, when you are independent, it means you have to be in charge of your reality. You need to be the master of your life, of your situation, of your destiny and stuff like that. But when we look in Africa, right after the independence, even until today, what we see is that the African man and African woman is not in charge of his life, is not in charge of his resources, is not in charge of his destiny. And the question is why? And here we answer by saying that because those steps, that process that need to be followed for a person to be totally free and liberated in order to be able to take charge of his nation, of his life, those steps were not followed. And that's the reason why today we are still behaving as children to the former oppressors who are still currently indirectly oppressors, so that we have to depend on them for certain decisions that are important to our existence as African people. When you see in a conflict, when there's a conflict in any African country, like now we're speaking of Senegal, you will see that oppositions are calling for European Union to come and intervene and to come and create what they call dialogue national, which is national dialogue, so that they can get to the point where they can understand each other. So these are grown men and women Africans who are unable to understand each other, to come together and speak and solve their problems. They're still relying on Europeans to come and do that. How many times in the Congo did we see European unions or European Union Commission going there to settle the conflicts when there were some conflicts between the ruling party and the opposition? So in a nutshell, we're still acting like children towards other people. So the question is, why? Even though we are in the independence. And the answer, as I said again, is there are steps that must be followed in order for one to be fully liberated, in order for one to be fully free and mature enough to take charge of his life. So you cannot expect a child who is born right now today to be able to take charge of a family. No, you need to be taken care of. There are steps that the child need to go through in order to mature, to grow, and to be able to take charge of his life. And that's the same thing with the freedom, because we consider freedom as when a person is liberated as a child who is born. So he need to grow through the educational process that will allow him to be able to take charge of his life. So in a nutshell, what we want to say here is the same thing that Dr. Umar Johnson said, by saying that you can take a slave out of slavery, but it's only a slave who can take slavery out of himself or herself. I will repeat this again. You can take a slave out of slavery, but it is a slave himself or herself who must take slavery out of himself or herself. So even though during 1960s we were declared independent in Africa, we were given the so-called independence in Africa, is not enough. After all these years that we were languishing, that we were subjected to the conditions of dehumanizations, condition of inferiority, all these things, they cannot just suddenly disappear for the fact that we have been declared independent or we have been declared free from slavery. There must be steps. There's a process that we by ourselves, by our own initiative, need to go through in order to elevate ourselves, in order to be able then to manage our states. And when we go through those steps, we won't be needing Europeans to come again to solve our problem. We won't be needing the IMF to come and give us the money or the loan. We won't be needing Chinese to call for Chinese forum where all the heads of states of Africa go to crowd themselves there as the kids. We won't be needing all these humiliating things. We'll be able to take charge of our lives. And that's the reason why we have the Free-Minded Pan-African Academy, where we are attempting to create a new class of leadership with a different mindset, so that we don't see Africa in 10 years in the same way that we see Africa of today or Africa of yesterday. We must see Africa that is developing its own foundation of reconstruction of Africa as a global power base. Now, before I speak about the steps or the process, probably we'll have this video in 3 or 4 phases, so that it doesn't get long, to allow people to quickly get to the message. So we'll break it in different pieces. So let me tell you a story before we even get into the steps that are necessary for our complete liberation and emancipation. When we were young, studying in the Congo, of course, one of our colleagues stole, I think he stole a cell phone from another classmate. So he was eventually arrested. We got him because we had to search everybody, and the police came and they arrested him. They arrested a young boy. They took him to custody. Now, that was around in the morning. So in the afternoon, towards evening, the policeman didn't want the boy. It was a kid. I mean, he made a mistake, never saw the phone before. So he didn't want him to sleep in the custody. He wanted to liberate the young boy. So now he called him out. Young man, come here. He gave him the money. He said, okay, go around the corner there and buy me a cigarette. And the young boy went out where the police told him, and he couldn't see the shop where they are selling cigarettes. So he comes back again. He said, okay, officer, I don't see any shop where they are selling cigarettes. And the policeman tells him, boy, just go check until you get, there's a shop there. If you don't see it, progress and go further and check when you see the shop, and buy me cigarettes and come back. And then the boy went back, checked, and he couldn't see a shop where they were buying cigarettes. And he came back again. Officer, I don't see any shop where they're selling cigarettes. And the officer said, boy, you are stupid. You are a thief. And I gave you the opportunity to use your skill and then to free yourself. Then he didn't take it. I'm going to put you back in the custody and you're going to sleep here today. So you see, that boy was freed, right? Was liberated. But the prison mindset, right? That prison mindset didn't leave him. So he had to come back to the same place where his freedom was, removed. The freedom was restricted. And it's mostly looking like is the situation that we are portraying now as African people. It's a reality that we are portraying now as African people. It's more of psychological, because we cannot understand that after independence of Africa, we are still relying on the very same people who designed the projects of colonialism to humiliate us, to destroy our culture, to destroy everything that we know. We're still depending on them, especially those who have money, or those who are, at the state management in Africa. They are relying on those people's institutions to send their kids to be educated. They are relying on them to be treated when they are sick. So it's like they don't have any vision for Africa. This is not a coincidence. So this is the same reality that happened to that boy. Even though Africa was declared on the papers independent in the 1960s, the mindset of Africans, from parents to children, because it becomes like a culture, what we are inculturating our kids into is to believe that we deserve to be in the custody of the people who oppressed us. And somehow we are showing to the world that we deserve the place that the white man has given us, the place of being his eternal servants. That's why we don't do much on ourselves, but we need a different Africa. But we cannot have a different Africa without different people, and we cannot have different people without having different mindsets. You see, when you look at all the thinkers of the past, all the philosophers, all the prophets, all the revolutionaries, I don't know where they talk about Jesus, Buddha, all these people, no matter how different they are or they were, one thing they have in common is that they have all come to agree that as a man thinks, so is his mind. So is his reality. As you think, so becomes your reality. And we can even bring this in a broader context to say that as a people think, so is their community, so is their society, so is their country and continent. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is the reality that we are seeing in Africa today, poverty, unemployment, hunger, a lot of things, right? Lack of what we call quote unquote development is of course due to the colonial projects and today neo-colonial projects, to the imperialism that we know how it functions. That is from the outside, but it is also due from the inside to our state of mind, because the Japanese were also destroyed with atomic bombs. They've never marched on streets to say Japanese life matters. They've never protested, and they've never relied really on the pleading with their oppressors, even though Japan was never colonized and Japan was given some opportunities. But all the money that given to Japan could have been done nothing if the mind of Japanese were not set to succeed. Because we must understand also, there have been a lot of money also given to Africa, and because our mind have not gone through the process that will allow us to be fully equipped, to be fully free and liberated, so that we can take charge of our reality, then we produce the results that we are producing. So thank you very much. We want to proceed on the next video to the steps, to the process that we have to go through for our liberation to become effective. Please follow all the short videos that we'll do on these steps, because it will help us as we need to recreate a new Africa. Peace and love, freedom and decolonization. See you then. Thank you.